7 years ago, I started working at Vital Smarts. I had no background in training, no background in organizational development, and somehow I landed this incredible job. And my memories of that first year or so are mostly about being intimidated because I was put on this very small team. And the people on this team with me were Joseph Grenny, Ron McMillan, Al Switzler, Carrie Patterson, David Maxfield, Steve Willis, and me. That was the team. I was a little out of my depth, but I came to work every day feeling just so honored and privileged and blessed to be there. Now, in honor of my first real job, I decided to buy a house, and I bought a home in beautiful Heber City, Utah. And that meant that every day I got to drive to work 20 minutes down Provo Canyon. Some of you were up Provo Canyon with us last night at Sundance. This was my drive to work. I literally took these pictures with my phone on the way to work one day. I drove down and I got to see Mount Timpanogos and Bridal Veil Falls, and it was just amazing. Life was good, so very, very good. And then 2 years later, life got even better when I married the love of my life, Clayton. Now, Clayton and I were a little bit older when we got married, older than the typical 21-year-old who gets married in Utah. And I like to think that that helped us, and we brought some wisdom and maturity to our relationship. But we also brought a lot of stuck-in-our-wayness to our marriage. And the first couple of years were very much about making changes. And one of the changes I made was that I moved from Heber City, Utah, beautiful, picturesque Heber City, Utah, to 1960s suburbia. Yes. I moved into Clayton's home in Bountiful, Utah, which is about 15 minutes north of Salt Lake. And I went from having a 20-minute drive to work that looked like this to a 65-minute drive to work that looked like this. The changes we make for love, yes. So the reason that this happened and that I chose to move to Clayton's house was because 5 years ago when I married Clayton, our wedding didn't actually look like this. It looked like this. I married Clayton and his 4 children from his first marriage. And suddenly I had this instant ready family. Bradley, the youngest, is actually much happier in person and was thrilled to be a part of our wedding, just not so thrilled to be in the pictures. And so because these kids lived in Bountiful, and they went to school in Bountiful, and they had friends in Bountiful, I started living in Bountiful, and I spent the next 5 years spending over 2 hours a day here in this place, I-15 corridor, going between Bountiful and Provo. Now, this has given me a lot of time to think over the last 5 years. And over the last 6 months, my thinking has been focused by a billboard campaign that's been going on. So there's been an ad campaign for a radio station, and the billboards look like this. They have a picture of like a woman with her toddler daughter in a field of wildflowers, or a family laughing gathered around the kitchen table. And the tagline is, "Go to your happy place." Now, I realize that I'm kind of a literal thinker, and I can be overly grounded in reality. But when this is the place I actually am at on I-15, it looks like, there you go, when this is where I am, a billboard saying "go to your happy place" does not help me, not at all. Does not bring me to, this is not my happy place. But I started thinking about happiness, and I started reading about happiness and studying happiness and thinking about what happiness is and how it functions in our life. And I came across a great psychologist by the name of Shawn Achor. Now, Shawn has spent most of his career at Harvard researching, studying, teaching about happiness. He also counsels students at Harvard. And he has some interesting and some intriguing ideas about happiness. One of his ideas is that we should take the whole formula we have for happiness and reverse it. So most of us have a typical formula in our head around what happiness is and how we get it, and it goes like this. If we work hard, we'll achieve success, and when we achieve success, we'll be happy. That's how life works. But here's the problem with that. When we achieve success, our mind does something really interesting. It moves the goalpost for what success looks like. So I get good grades one semester. The next semester, I have to get even better grades. I hit my sales target 1 year. The next year, my sales target goes up. We are constantly shifting that goalpost of success. So if you put happiness on the far side of success, that I must work hard, achieve success, and then I will be happy, you will never be happy because you're constantly moving the goalposts of success. We have pushed happiness over the cognitive horizon. We can't get there. Now, Shawn would argue that this is totally backwards, that in fact, it's not that success leads to happiness, but that happiness leads to success. And his research shows why this is so. There's a physiologic basis for this. So if you think about the way your brain works, there are two primary neurotransmitters that control most of what goes in our brain, and one of them is dopamine. Now, dopamine is kind of the mediator of all happiness. And when we feel happy, our brain floods with dopamine. We're just sort of in this dopamine-induced state of happiness. But the other thing that dopamine does, in addition to regulating happiness, is it regulates learning. It opens up and activates the learning centers of our brain. It takes care of retention and perseverance and the things that you need in order to learn. So Sean says he has what he calls the happiness advantage, and it's this, that the brain at positive, in a happy state, performs better than the brain at negative, neutral, or stressed. And he's done a lot of studies to show that this is true, that when you're happy, you actually learn better, work better, smarter, harder, and more, and you achieve more success. So happiness leads to success. The happiness advantage, then again, is that the brain at positive performs better than at negative, neutral, or stressed. Okay, so I thought this was really fascinating, and because of my role at Vital Smarts, I spend a lot of time thinking about instructional design and how we should lay out our training programs. And I thought about how this might apply to learning. And I reflected on an experience I had a couple of years ago when we launched the Change Anything product. So we're getting ready to launch Change Anything, and we wanted some of our fabulous master trainers to be up to speed in order so that they could deliver a presentation on Change Anything to folks like you. So we picked 5 master trainers, and we had them come and spend the day with us in our offices. They spent a whole day with me, Carrie, and Joseph. One of those master trainers was Barbara Hauser, and I haven't seen Barbara yet this morning, but I know she's going to be with us today because she's leading a breakout session. So Barbara Hauser was one of these master trainers that came in to spend a day with us, and we spent most of the day sharing content and ideas and talking about how the Change Anything model worked. But as part of the day, we gave every master trainer a 20-minute sample presentation that we wanted them to give to us. In the best sense of deliberate practice, Joseph, Carrie, and I would sit there and watch them and give them feedback. Sounds like fun, doesn't it, right? To teach Change Anything to Joseph Grenny, yep, that's super fun. But Barbara stepped up to the challenge, and I'll always remember her presentation. She started off basically like most of us start off with a Change Anything presentation, and she gave us all a change challenge. Think about a change you want to make in your life and what you'd like to do differently. And so I was doing my best to participate, and I thought about a change I wanted to make. And then Barbara did something different. She took us through a visualization exercise. Now remember, I'm grounded in reality. I'm a left brain thinker. I'm not a visualization person, but I was, trying to support Barbara, so I went through this exercise with us. And she asked us to experience what our life would be like when that change happened. It was the most astonishing thing. I'll always remember it. I could feel the dopamine flooding my brain, and I had this immense happiness and joy as I thought about, and my mind opened to the possibilities of what this would be like. Now, that in and of itself was extraordinary for me, but the part that really changed the way I thought about this was what happened next. Barbara went on to teach us a Change Anything principle. It was the willpower trap. I remember almost word for word everything she taught me. Now, that's what's amazing, right? Because, let's be clear, this wasn't the first time I'd heard about the willpower trap. In fact, the slides that Barbara was training off of, I had written them and given them to her. So I was well familiar with what the willpower trap was. I'd been on the Change Anything design team. I'd helped build the training. I knew the willpower trap. But I didn't know the way Barbara taught it to me until she did. There was something about that lens of that dopamine-induced state of happiness that cemented the learning inside of me in a way that was totally new. So this is my first reflection on learning. How can we create those moments of happiness in our training that will lead to a whole different kind of learning? Plato said that all learning has an emotional basis, right? This was thousands of years before we even knew what dopamine was. But all learning has an emotional basis, and how true that is. As I thought about crucial conversations and moments of happiness, I was a little worried because for those of you who train, for example, crucial conversations, you'll know that we spent the first about hour and a half of the training in Get Unstuck. And it's all about how bad your life is, how stuck you are, how you're getting no good results, and you've ruined all your relationships, right? It's like this whole experience in depression, really. And we do it for a really good reason, and it really works, which is we want to create buy-in for people between you're getting bad results and you need these skills, we're going to help you get better. And that's an important learning connection to make. But how can we inject some moments of happiness into that to really solidify that learning, to open up and activate the learning centers in the brain? So as I thought about reflection number 1 and this idea of creating happiness, what might create happiness? And I thought, what makes me happy? What makes me happy? I know, failure, right? Everybody loves to fail. Here's a problem. This is the great irony, right? We also know that failure leads to learning. We can think about those times where we've experienced a personal failure and we've learned something that has stayed with us forever. As I've thought about failure, I think about Rich Sheridan. Some of you have the opportunity at Reach to hear Rich Sheridan. He's a fantastic influencer, the CEO of Menlo Innovations in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And he's come out and shared with us some of what they've done around some of the influencer principles to create a really unique and positive culture at Menlo. One of Rich's mantras is, fail faster. Now, he applies this to this idea of project management and innovation, but you got to fail faster. And I've thought about how that might relate to learning. Why don't we like to fail? Well, one of the reasons we don't like to fail is because in a learning environment, it's because there's a lot of social pressure. There's a lot of source 3 social pressure. I don't want to fail in front of other people. And so I hang back and I don't participate, and I try and hold off that moment of failure as long as I possibly can. But what if we could help people fail faster? So it was safer. If we failed right off at the beginning, we sort of do this in Crucial Conversations again as an example, in that we create an experience of failure right at the beginning for people when we say, how did you get your way as a child? As an experience of failure, right? I whined, I complained, I held my breath, I threw tantrums, and it didn't work. But for most of us, that experience of failure is way, way in the past. And it's not meaningful to us. So how do we create that safety to have failure right up front, rather than waiting till, say, the end of day 1, to have people do the 3-headed coworker exercise? Well, one way we can help people fail faster is simply to go faster, to move through the material faster. This is a little bit counterintuitive to, I think, a lot of us who are teachers and educators by heart, because I go into a classroom and I want to make sure that everyone in the classroom is learning, that they're getting, that they're going to change because of what I give them, right? This deep desire to make sure I don't miss a single person in the room. And that's one of the reasons I love the PRS, the Participant Response System and Influencer. It's so great, right? Because you can quiz them on them right then in the moment, and you know that 2 out of your 35 learners didn't get it. And what can you do? You can reteach it. You can reteach it in a whole new way with a different story and a different example. And my experience is that when you reteach it, you get about a 50% chance of getting those 2 learners to really understand it. But you also have about a 99% chance of taking the other 33 learners into a boredom-induced coma as you go through the same stuff they just learned. So contrast this with what Ethna Reed teaches us. Ethna is one of our influencers that we studied for the original influencer book many years ago. And about 5 years ago, we at the training team at Vital Smarts invited Ethna to come in and spend a day with us because we wanted to learn from her. She taught us a lot of different things, but one of the things she's taught us that really stuck with me is that you should teach to the top third of the class. You should pace your teaching to the top third of the class. It's like, Ethna, the top third? What about No Child Left Behind? You're leaving a whole third of the class behind, right? But Ethna says, no, you teach to the top third of the class. Well, I took on Ethna's challenge a couple of years ago and started to think, I'm going to teach to the top third of the class. I'm going to pace myself to the top third of the class. And this is what, in my experience, happens when you pace yourself to the top third of the class. The top third, they love you. They're like, this is the best training ever. It's the only one that wasn't boring. I loved it. The middle third is really stretched. They're working hard, they're keeping up, but they're putting a lot of energy and focus into just keeping up. And the bottom third, you've totally lost them. They hate it, they think, what's going on? I don't even know what training I'm in here. Completely lost them. Here's the other thing, though, that happens when you teach to the top third of the class. You go faster. You get through more content in less time. And that means you have more time. You have more time at the end and in the middle and all the way through the training. And you can do something with that time. Most of us, our tendency to do with that time is to say, ooh, I'm going to fill it with more content. For those smarty pants top third, they're going to learn more. I can say more about all these great insights that I have. But if you can pull back on that tendency and not fill the time with more content, you can fill it with something else. You can fill it with the top third teaching the bottom third. And that's when something magical happens. Because what happens is every learner in the group gets the learning. But the top third gets it in a deep, powerful, meaningful way because they have not only learned it, they have taught it to someone else. The last thing that happens when you teach to the top third, as Ethna suggests we do, is that you get worse evaluations at the end. You do. You get those little happy faces, and that bottom third, they weren't very happy. They were like, that instructor, she just went too fast, and I didn't like her at all. Learned a lot from the course, didn't much like that instructor. But that's okay, because as an instructor, when you get to that place where you've created a course and taught and delivered a course where people have failed faster and earlier, and where the bottom third has thought you went too fast, but the top third got to teach them, and you get those horrible evaluations where people said the pace was totally off, but I learned a lot, that's when as an instructor, you need to remember what Sean Aker teaches us. You gotta go to your happy place. And you gotta remember that success does not lead to happiness. That formula is wrong. But happiness will lead you to success in life and in learning. Thank you.